And only because of media pressure, the Albanese government is acting on the Alice Springs crisis, but far too slow, far too late and far too little. Now, last year, the Northern Territory Labor government dropped the booze bans on more than 400 Aboriginal community. Instant disaster. 50% jump in emergency cases in Alice Springs, just as a for instance, and the most astonishing crime wave to go with it. Totally ignored by the Albanese government, which seems absolutely distracted by its ridiculous plan instead for a voice to Parliament, a kind of Aboriginal-only advisory parliament dividing us by race. Meanwhile, it was ignoring some of the many, many Aboriginal voices we have already. Health and welfare organisations, National Senator Jacinta Nampijinpa-Price, Labor Senator Marion Scrymgeour and others who last year signed a petition demanding the government clamp down on the booze and the mayhem in Alice Springs. So, why didn't Indigenous Australians Minister Linda Burney act then? And why only now that Alice Springs is a media sensation and a Labor embarrassment? Well, last week, Prime Minister Anthony Albanese thought, got to go, finally flew into Alice Springs for just 4 hours. That's before he went to the Australian Open for 3 nights. And he demanded a report on his desk by yesterday on how to fix it. Now what? Where's the action? Joining me is Matt Cunningham, Sky News Northern Australia correspondent. Matt Cunningham, good to see you. The Prime Minister flew in for about 4 hours last week. He was going to the chaos in Alice Springs, ordered a report on his desk within the week to fix it, and is immediately, well, now we know, bits of it being leaked, it wants to reinstate, it wants the booze bans reinstated essentially. But why did it take so long to come back to realise, wait a minute, removing them in the first place was a disastrous mistake?
Well, and also, why is it now taking so long to act in response to this report, Andrew? The Prime Minister just yesterday said that once receiving this report, he wanted to act without delay, and now today he's announced a delay in acting. So we're being told that it won't be until next week, when both his cabinet and the Northern Territory cabinet have had the opportunity to properly consider this report from Darrell Anderson, that there will be a decision made. Now, it should come as no surprise that this report is recommending that those alcohol bans be reinstated, because that's what pretty much everyone has been saying for almost 12 months. They were saying that before the bans were lifted in July. You had Marion Scrymgeour and Jacinta Price in the federal parliament after the bans had been lifted, saying it was a disaster. And we've since seen the statistics that prove that to be true, a 55% increase in alcohol-related presentations at the emergency department of the Alice Springs Hospital since July last year. So everything points to this being a disaster, and it has pointed to this being a disaster for a long time. It's now in the report, but we've been told this afternoon that we're still going to have to wait until next week before there's any decision.
Look, this really flabbergasts me. Is it because the Northern Territory Chief Minister, Natasha Fyles, doesn't want to admit she made a mistake? Are they trying to find a way of not quite bringing the booze bans back or doing it in another form so she doesn't look like a fool?
Well, that's what I thought at first, Andrew. I interviewed Natasha Fyles as Anthony Albanese was about to arrive in Alice Springs last Tuesday. Now, when I spoke to her then, she was adamant this was a race-based policy. Her government wasn't going to change her mind. 3.5 hours later, after the NT government had been in meetings with the Prime Minister, there had been a change of heart. There was going to be a review. And it seemed to me at the time that they were sort of going to try to slowly undo this so that the Northern Territory government could save some face, because it's been so wedded to that position. But even today, the Chief Minister was still sticking to that line and not necessarily saying that they were going to do what this report is, from all reports, recommending. I can't imagine a situation, though, Andrew, where if this report that is handed down by the Northern Territory's own public servant, Darrell Anderson, comes and says, as we're being told it does, that these alcohol bans need to be reinstated. I cannot imagine a situation where the Northern Territory would still turn around and say, no, we're not going to do this. I mean, that would just be farcical. So I'd love to be able to explain it to you better than that. I think there might be some internal politics at play. I think they might be trying to say to some of these people in these communities, look, we're trying to stick up for you, we're trying to do what you want, so that when the NT election comes around next year, they'll be assured of their vote. There's no other reasonable explanation for it.
It's weird, you know, here we've got Labor demanding a voice to Parliament, so we hear Aboriginal voices. Now we've got Aboriginal voices screaming like in one big chorus, bring back the booze bans. What? They suddenly can't hear. I mean, it's just, I'm flabbergasted. But just remind us, though, the thing is, though, we're all talking about the booze bans, Matt. But for me, even more critical is that we've got so many underparented kids, and it's not just in Alice Springs, it's in other communities too, right? Yuendamu and Wadare and Tennant Creek, etc. The children, I don't yet see anything to get the children off the street and into safety and just get them some routine, some hope for the future.
Well, how many times have you and I discussed this very issue over the last 6 or 7 years, Andrew? And we've talked about some of the evidence that's been presented in relation to this. Let's go back to Hilary Hannam, who gave evidence to the Royal Commission here in the Northern Territory, remembering it was a Royal Commission into the protection and detention of children. And remember her telling some of those horror stories and talking about the unwillingness of authorities to act. You know, we see that play out time and time again. Last week I spoke to a doctor in Alice Springs who works at the Alice Springs Hospital. Some of the stories he told me, Andrew, would absolutely blow your mind. He told me a story about an 8-year-old girl who had to wave down an ambulance to get her baby sibling to hospital because her mother was too drunk. The doctor said that they called Territory Families. They waited a long time for Territory Families to arrive. That's the Child Protection Department here in the Northern Territory. And then Territory Families wanted to send the mother home with the 2 children. So there's this issue here. We've spoken about it so many times. We know about the Deborah Melville case as well, Andrew, which we've discussed
that is
at length before.
But it's been for so long.
I know that there.
Matt, it's not just been the Northern Territory. You might remember the Bonnie Robertson report was 20 years ago in Queensland, talking about, you know, underage girls being so badly raped they'd scream at being, you know, if medically examined. And it's been going on for so long, and we just do not get action. And it's happening all again. You know, let's go, look over here, a voice to Parliament. Oh, look over there, we're going to change the $5 bill and put an Aboriginal face in it. Will that do? I mean, Matt, I'm afraid that you and I are going to be talking about this topic for a long time. Thank you very much for coming on tonight. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Andrew. Cheers.